The Martinez mansion stood tall in the heart of San Diego, its sprawling lawn and pristine architecture a symbol of wealth and status. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Elena Martinez, 19 years old, sat on the edge of her bed clutching a letter. It was her acceptance letter from San Diego Community College, the only one she had received after applying to several universities. She took a deep breath and stood up, her legs feeling heavy as she made her way downstairs. In the living room, her parents, Carlos and Isabella Martinez, were seated. Carlos, a man in his late 50s with a stern expression, was reading the newspaper. Isabella, elegant and composed, sipped tea from a delicate cup. Elena hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. "I got accepted to college," Elena said, holding out the letter. Carlos lowered the newspaper and took the letter from her hand. His eyes scanned the page, and his expression darkened. "Community college," he said, his voice cold. "This is what you've been working toward. This is what you call an achievement." Elena swallowed hard. "It's a start, Dad. I can transfer to a 4-year university later. I just need—" Carlos cut her off, his voice rising. "Need what? More time to embarrass this family. Do you have any idea what people will say when they find out my daughter is attending a community college?" Isabella remained silent, her eyes fixed on her teacup. Elena turned to her, hoping for some support, but her mother's expression was unreadable. "I'm trying my best," Elena said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "I've been struggling, and I just need some support." Carlos stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Support? You've done nothing but disappoint us. You're a failure, Elena, and I won't have you dragging this family's name through the mud any longer." Elena's heart sank as her father began pacing the room. "If you want to waste your life at a community college, fine, but you'll do it on your own. Pack your things and get out of this house." The words hit Elena like a punch to the gut. She looked to her mother, desperate for some kind of reassurance, but Isabella's gaze remained fixed on her teacup. "Mom, please," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Isabella finally looked up, her expression cold. "Your father's right, Elena. You've brought this on yourself." Elena stood there for a moment, stunned, before turning and walking back. Upstairs, she packed a duffel bag with her belongings, her hands trembling as she folded clothes and grabbed a few personal items. She paused in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, glancing back one last time. Downstairs, Carlos had retreated to his study, and Isabella was back to scrolling through her phone. No one came to say goodbye. Elena stepped out of the mansion, the heavy door closing behind her with a final thud. She stood on the driveway, the weight of the duffel bag pulling at her shoulder. The sun had set, and the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. She took a deep breath, her chest tightening as she walked away from the only home she had ever known. She arrived at her friend Mia's small apartment later that night. Mia opened the door, her face filled with concern as she saw Elena standing there with the duffel bag. "Elena, what happened?" Mia asked. Elena shook her head, unable to find the words. Mia pulled her into a hug. "You can stay here as long as you need," Mia said. "We'll figure this out together." Elena nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." That night, Elena lay on Mia's pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in her mind, each word from her parents cutting deeper than the last. She clenched her fists, her jaw tightening as she whispered to herself, "I'll show them. I'll prove them wrong." The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Mia's small apartment, casting a soft glow over the room. Elena Martinez lay on the pull-out couch, her eyes open but heavy with exhaustion. She hadn't slept much, her mind racing with thoughts of the previous day. Her father's harsh words, her mother's cold indifference, and the weight of the duffel bag that now sat at the foot of the couch. She sat up slowly, running a hand through her tangled hair, and glanced at the clock. It was just past 7 a.m. Mia emerged from the kitchen holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Elena and sat down beside her. "How are you holding up?" Mia asked, her voice gentle. Elena took the mug, wrapping her hands around it for warmth. "I don't know," she admitted. I can't believe this is happening." Mia nodded, sipping her coffee. "I know it's hard, but you're stronger than you think. You'll get through this." Elena didn't respond right away. She stared into her coffee, the steam rising in thin wisps. "I have to figure out what's next," she said finally. "I can't just sit here and do nothing." Mia smiled. "Good, that's the spirit. Let's start with the basics. You've got your acceptance letter, right? San Diego Community College?" Elena nodded, reaching for her bag and pulling out the letter. She unfolded it and stared at the words, as if seeing them for the first time. "Yeah, I start in a few weeks." "Okay," Mia said, setting her mug down. "First, we need to figure out your living situation. You can stay here as long as you need, but it's not exactly a long-term solution." Eleanor looked around the small apartment. It was cozy but cramped, with barely enough room for Mia, let alone a guest. "I'll start looking for a place," she said. "And a job. I need to pay for tuition and rent." Mia nodded. "I can help with that. There's a diner down the street that's always hiring. It's not glamorous, but it's something." Eleanor managed a small smile. "Thanks, Mia. I don't know what I'd do without you." Later that day, Eleanor found herself standing outside the diner, her heart pounding in her chest. The sign above the door read, "Joe's Diner," and through the window, she could see a handful of customers sitting at the counter, sipping coffee and chatting with the waitstaff. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the bell above it jingling softly. A middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense expression stood behind the counter, wiping down a coffee pot. She looked up as Eleanor approached. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hi," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm looking for a job. I was told you might be hiring." The woman studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We are. You ever waitressed before?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, but I'm a fast learner." The woman raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "All right, we'll give you a shot. Can you start tomorrow?" Elena blinked, surprised by how quickly things were moving. "Yes, I can start tomorrow." "Good. Be here at 6 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." The woman handed her a uniform, a simple black apron and a name tag. "I'm Linda, by the way. I'll be training you." Eleanor nodded, clutching the uniform to her chest. "Thank you, Linda. I won't let you down." The next morning, Elena arrived at the diner before the sun had fully risen. The streets were quiet, the city still waking up. She tied the apron around her waist and pinned the name tag to her shirt, her hands trembling slightly. Linda was all ready, behind the counter, pouring coffee for the early morning regulars. "Morning," Linda said, handing Elena a notepad and a pen. "You'll start by taking orders. Just write down what people want and bring it to the kitchen." "Simple enough?" Elena nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. She took a deep breath and approached her first table, a group of construction workers who were already deep in conversation. "Good morning," she said, forcing a smile. "What can I get for you?" The day passed in a blur of orders, spilled, coffee, and hurried apologies. By the time her shift ended, Elena's feet ached and her apron was stained with syrup and grease. But as she counted her tips at the end of the day, she felt a small sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, she sat at Mia's kitchen table, a stack of community college brochures spread out in front of her. She flipped through them, her eyes scanning the course offerings. Chemistry caught her attention, a subject she had always found fascinating but never had the chance to fully explore. She circled it on the registration form, her hand steady. Maya walked in, carrying a plate of pasta. "How was your first day?" she asked, setting the plate down in front of Elena. "Exhausting," Elena admitted, picking up her fork. But good. I think I can do this. Mia smiled. I know you can. You're tougher than you give yourself credit for. Elena nodded, her determination growing with each passing moment. She had a plan now, a job, a place to stay, and a goal. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of early mornings and late nights for Elena. Her days began before sunrise, with the sound of her alarm jolting her awake. She would pull on her diner uniform, grab a quick breakfast, and head out the door, the streets still quiet and empty. By the time she arrived at Joe's diner, the regulars were already seated at the counter, their coffee cups steaming in the cool morning air. Linda, the no-nonsense manager, had taken Elena under her wing. She was tough but fair, and Elena quickly learned the rhythm of the diner, how to balance multiple orders, how to keep the coffee flowing, and how to handle the occasional difficult customer. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her a sense of purpose. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was contributing something, even if it was just serving eggs and toast. In the afternoons, after her shift ended, Elena would head to the library. She had enrolled in her first semester at San Diego Community College, and her classes were set to begin in a few weeks. She spent hours poring over textbooks, trying to catch up on the material she had missed in high school. Chemistry, in particular, fascinated her. She loved the precision of it, the way everything fit together like pieces of a puzzle. It was a challenge, but one she was determined to conquer. One evening, as she sat at the library, her head buried in a chemistry textbook, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mia. "Hey, how's it going? You've been MIA lately." Elena smiled and typed back, "Just trying to stay on top of everything. Classes start soon, and I don't want to fall behind." Mia's response came quickly. "You're going to kill it, but don't forget to take a break every now and then. You're allowed to have a life, you know." Elena chuckled softly and set her phone aside. She knew Mia was right, but she couldn't afford to slow down. Not now, not when she had so much to prove. The first day of classes arrived, and Elena felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she walked onto the campus of San Diego Community College. The campus was smaller than she had imagined, with a handful of buildings, clustered around a central courtyard. Students milled about, chatting and laughing, their backpacks slung over their shoulders. Elena tightened her grip on her own backpack and made her way to her first class. Introduction to Chemistry. The classroom was small, with rows of desks facing a whiteboard at the front. Elena took a seat near the back, her heart pounding as the professor walked in. He was a tall man with greying hair and a kind smile. He introduced himself as Dr. Patel and began the lecture by outlining the course syllabus. Elena listened intently, her pen flying across the page as she took notes. As the weeks went by, Elena settled into a routine. Her days were long, early, mornings at the diner, followed by classes and study sessions at the library. But she didn't mind. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was in control. She was working towards something, building a future for herself, one step at a time. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling shift at the diner, Elena returned to Mia's apartment to find a package waiting for her. It was a small box, addressed to her in neat handwriting. She opened it to find a set of high-quality chemistry textbooks, along with a note, "For the future Dr. Martinez. Love, Tia Rosa." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she read the note. Tia Rosa, her mother's younger sister, had always been the one person in her family who believed in her. She was the black sheep of the family, just like Elena, and the two had always shared a special bond. Elena hadn't seen her in years, but the gift was a reminder that she wasn't completely alone. She sat down on the couch, clutching the note to her chest. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel a sense of hope. She had a long way to go, but she was on the right path, and with each passing day, She was one step closer to proving her parents wrong. The weeks turned into months, and Elena's life settled into a rhythm. Her days were a blur of early mornings at the diner, afternoons in class, and late nights studying in the library. The workload was intense, but Elena thrived on the challenge. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was in control of her future. Her chemistry class was her favorite. Dr. Patel was a passionate teacher, and his lectures were filled with fascinating insights into the world of molecules and reactions. Elena found herself captivated by the subject, spending hours in the library poring over textbooks and working through practice problems. She had always been a good student, but this was different. This was something she had chosen for herself, something she was passionate about. As the midterm exam approached, Elena's nerves began to build. She had been studying relentlessly, but the thought of failing was always in the back of her mind. She couldn't afford to slip up. Not now, not when she had come so far. The night before the exam, Elena sat at the kitchen table in Mia's apartment, surrounded by stacks of notes and textbooks. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. She flipped through her notes, muttering chemical formulas under her breath. Mia walked in, carrying a cup of tea. "You've been at this for hours," she said, setting the tea down in front of Elena. "You need to take a break." Elena shook her head, her eyes still fixed on her notes. "I can't. I need to make sure I'm ready." Mia sighed and sat down across from her. "Elena, you're going to burn yourself out. You've been working non-stop for weeks. You need to rest." Elena looked up, her expression tense. "I can't afford to rest, Mia. This exam is important. If I fail—" "You're not going to fail," Mia interrupted. "You've been studying non-stop. You know this stuff inside and out. But you're not going to do yourself any favors if you're too exhausted to think straight." Elena hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "You're right. I can't stop thinking about what's at stake." Mia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know, but you've got this. You're stronger than you think." The next morning, Elena arrived at the classroom early, her stomach churning with nerves. She took a seat near the front, her hands trembling as she pulled out her pencil and calculator. The other students filed in, their faces a mix of confidence and anxiety. Dr. Patel walked in a few minutes later, carrying a stack of exams. "Good morning, everyone," he said, setting the exams down on his desk. "I know you've all been working hard, and I'm confident you'll do well. Just remember to read each question carefully and show your work. Good luck." He began passing out the exams, and Elena's heart raced as she flipped through the pages. The questions were challenging, but familiar. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now it was time to prove herself. The next hour passed in a blur. Elena's pencil flew across the page as she worked through each problem, her mind focused and sharp. When the time was up, she set her pencil down and took a deep breath, her hands still shaking. Dr. Patel collected the exams, and the students began to file out of the classroom. Elena lingered for a moment, her mind racing. She had done her best, but the weight of the exam still hung over her. A few days later, Dr. Patel returned the graded exams. Elena's heart pounded as he handed her paper back. She hesitated for a moment before flipping it over. At the top of the page, in bold red ink, was a score, 92%. Elena stared at the number, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had earned it. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of pride. She had taken the first step toward proving herself, and it felt like a small victory. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, the exam paper spread out in front of her. Mia walked in and glanced at the score, her face breaking into a grin. "I told you you'd do great," she said, pulling Elena into a hug. Elena smiled, her chest swelling with pride. "It's just one exam," she said, "but it feels like a start." Mia nodded. "It is. And you're going to keep crushing it. I know you will. The success of her first chemistry exam gave Elena a newfound confidence. She continued to pour herself into her studies, balancing her time between the diner, classes, and the library. The workload was relentless, but she was determined to make the most of her opportunity at San Diego Community College. One afternoon, after her shift at the diner, Elena stayed behind to help Linda clean up. As they wiped down the counters and restocked the condiments, Linda glanced at her. "You've been working hard," she said. "How's school going?" Elena smiled, a hint of pride in her voice. "It's going well. I just got my first exam back, and I did pretty good." Linda nodded, her expression softening. "That's great to hear. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Elena. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. Linda wasn't one for compliments, so the words meant a lot. "Thanks, Linda. That means a lot coming from you." Linda shrugged, her tone gruff but kind. "Just keep at it. You've got a bright future ahead of you." Later that week, Elena received an email from Dr. Patel. He was offering an opportunity for students to participate in a research project at a local lab. The project focused on environmental chemistry, a field that had always intrigued Elena. She read the email twice, her heart racing with excitement. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she'd been hoping for. She immediately replied, expressing her interest, and within a few days, she found herself sitting in Dr. Patel's office, discussing the details of the project. "This is a great opportunity for you," Dr. Patel said, leaning back in his chair. "The lab is run by Dr. Collins, a colleague of mine. He's one of the best in the field, and he's always looking for motivated students to join his team." Elena nodded, her mind racing. "I'd love to be part of it. What would I need to do?" Dr. Patel smiled. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Work hard, stay focused, and show them what you're capable of. I'll put in a good word for you." A few weeks later, Elena received another email, this time from Dr. Collins himself. He had reviewed her application and was impressed by her dedication and academic performance. He invited her to visit the lab and meet the team. The day of the visit, Elena dressed carefully, choosing a simple blouse and slacks. She wanted to make a good impression. The lab was located on the outskirts of the city, in a modern building surrounded by trees. As she walked through the doors, she was struck by the sense of purpose that filled the air. Researchers moved about with focused intensity, their lab coats swishing as they worked. Dr. Collins greeted her warmly. He was a tall man with a kind smile and a passion for chemistry that was immediately apparent. "Elena, it's great to meet you," he said, shaking her hand. "Dr. Patel speaks very highly of you." Elena smiled, her nerves easing slightly. "Thank you, Dr. Collins. I'm really excited about this opportunity." He led her on a tour of the lab, explaining the various projects they were working on. Elena listened intently, her excitement growing with each passing moment. The research was fascinating, and she could see herself contributing to something meaningful. At the end of the tour, Dr. Collins turned to her. "We'd love to have you join the team," he said. "It's a lot of work, but I think you'd be a great fit." Elena's heart soared. "Thank you, Dr. Collins. I'd be honored to be part of the team." As she left the lab that day, Elena felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. This was more than just a research opportunity. It was a glimpse of the future she had been working so hard to build. She had taken another step forward, and the path ahead was clearer than ever. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, her mind buzzing with excitement. Mia walked in and immediately noticed the change in her demeanor. "What's got you so happy?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Elena grinned. "I got accepted into a research project at a local lab. It's a huge opportunity." Mia's face broke into a wide smile. "That's amazing, Elena. I knew you'd do great things." Elena nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "It's just the beginning, but it feels like I'm finally on the right track." Elena's first day at the research lab was a mix of excitement and nerves. She arrived early, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a notebook clutched in her hand. The lab was already buzzing with activity when she walked in. Researchers in white coats moved between workstations, their conversations a low hum of scientific jargon. Elena took a deep breath and reminded herself that she belonged here. Dr. Collins greeted her with a warm smile. "Elena, welcome. Let me introduce you to the team." He led her to a group of researchers gathered around a lab bench. "Everyone, this is Elena Martinez. She'll be joining us on the environmental chemistry project. Elena, this is Sarah, Mark, and Priya. They'll be your mentors for the next few weeks." Elena shook hands with each of them, her nerves easing slightly as they welcomed her with friendly smiles. Sarah, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanour, handed her a lab coat. "Here you go, you'll need this." Elena slipped on the coat, feeling a sense of belonging as she adjusted the sleeves. "Thanks. I'm really excited to be here." The first few days were a whirlwind of learning. Elena shadowed Sarah and Mark as they conducted experiments, her notebook filling with detailed notes. She learned how to prepare samples, operate the lab equipment, and analyze data. It was challenging work, but Elena thrived on the challenge. For the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. One afternoon, as she was helping Priya with a particularly complex experiment, Priya glanced at her. "You're picking this up fast," she said, her tone impressed. "Have you worked in a lab before?" Elena shook her head. "No, this is my first time, but I've been studying chemistry for a while, and I really love it." Priya smiled. "Well, you've got a natural talent for it. Keep it up, and you'll go far." Elena felt a swell of pride at the compliment. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and it felt good to know that her efforts were paying off. As the weeks went by, Elena became more confident in her role at the lab. She started taking on more responsibilities, assisting with experiments and even contributing ideas during team meetings. Dr. Collins noticed her progress and began to give her more challenging tasks. One day, he called her into his office. "Elena, I've been impressed with your work," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I'd like you to take the lead on a small project we're starting next week. It's a great opportunity to showcase your skills." Eleanor's heart raced with excitement. "Thank you, Dr. Collins. I won't let you down." The project focused on developing a new method for detecting pollutants in water samples. It was a complex task, but Elena threw herself into it with determination. She spent long hours in the lab, running tests and analysing data. There were setbacks along the way, but she refused to give up. Each failure was a learning opportunity, and she was determined to succeed. One evening, as she was packing up her things, Sarah walked over. "You've been working late a lot," she said, her tone casual but concerned. "Don't forget to take care of yourself, Elena." "Burnout is real," Elena smiled. "I know, but I'm so close to a breakthrough. I can't stop now." Sarah nodded, her expression understanding. "Just remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You've got a bright future ahead of you, but you need to pace yourself." Elena took the advice to heart, making sure to take breaks and get enough rest. But her determination never wavered. She was driven by a desire to prove herself, not just to her family, but to herself. Elena's days at the lab became a blur of experiments, data analysis, and late-night study sessions. The project she was leading, developing a new method for detecting pollutants in water samples, was consuming most of her time. But she didn't mind. She was determined to make a breakthrough, no matter how long it took. One evening, as the lab was emptying out, Elena stayed behind to run one final test. She had been tweaking the parameters of the experiment for weeks, and she was convinced she was close to something significant. The lab was quiet, the only sound the gentle hum of the equipment. Elena adjusted the settings on the spectrometer and carefully prepared the sample, her hands steady despite the late hour. As the machine processed the sample, Elena sat back and rubbed her eyes. She was exhausted, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Not when she was so close. The spectrometer beeped, signaling that the analysis was complete. Elena leaned forward, her heart pounding as she read the results on the screen. Her eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. The data was clear. She had done it. She had developed a method that was not only more accurate, but also faster and more cost-effective than existing techniques. Elena's hands trembled as she printed out the results. She couldn't believe it. This was the breakthrough she had been working toward, the moment she'd been dreaming of. She grabbed her phone and texted Mia. "I did it. I think I actually did it." Mia's response came quickly. "That's amazing. I knew you could do it. Celebrate tonight. You've earned it." Elena smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. She packed up her things and headed home, her mind racing with possibilities. This was more than just a personal victory. It was a step toward making a real impact in the field of environmental chemistry. The next morning, Elena arrived at the lab early, the printed results clutched in her hand. She went straight to Dr. Collins' office and knocked on the door. "Come in," he called. Elena stepped inside, her heart racing. "Dr. Collins, I think I've made a breakthrough," she said, handing him the data. He took the papers and scanned them, his expression growing more impressed with each passing second. "Eleanor, this is incredible," he said, looking up at her. "Do you realize what this means? This could revolutionize the way we detect pollutants in water." Eleanor nodded, her chest swelling with pride. "I know. I can't believe it actually worked." Dr. Collins smiled. "Believe it. You've done something remarkable here. We'll need to run more tests to confirm the results, but if this holds up, we'll be submitting this for publication, and you'll be the lead author." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Really? Thank you. I'm just glad I could contribute." Dr. Collins leaned forward, his expression serious. "Elena, this is more than just a contribution. This is a game changer, and it's all because of your hard work and dedication. Don't sell yourself short." Elena left his office feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. She had done it. She had proven herself, not just to her family, but to the world. And this was just the beginning. That evening, she celebrated with Mia, who had insisted on taking her out for dinner. They sat at a small table in a cozy restaurant toasting to Elena's success. "I'm so proud of you," Mia said, raising her glass. "You've come so far, and this is just the start. Who knows what you'll accomplish next?" Elena smiled, her heart full. "Thanks, Mia. I couldn't have done it without you." As they ate and talked, Elena felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in years. She'd worked so hard to get to this point, and it felt good to finally see the results of her efforts. But she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. The weeks following Elena's breakthrough were a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Collins and the rest of the team worked tirelessly to validate her results, running additional tests and refining the methodology. The data held up, and soon the team began preparing a paper to submit to a prestigious scientific journal. Elena was named the lead author, a recognition that filled her with both pride and a sense of responsibility. One afternoon, as Elena was reviewing the final draft of the paper, Dr. Collins called her into his office. "Elena, I have some news," he said, his tone serious but excited. "The journal has accepted our paper. It's going to be published next month." Elena's heart leapt. "That's amazing! I can't believe it!" Dr. Collins smiled. "Believe it. Your work is going to make waves in the scientific community, and there's more. We've been invited to present our findings at the International Conference on Environmental Chemistry in Toronto." Elena's eyes widened. "Toronto? That's huge." Dr. Collins nodded. "It is, and I want you to be the one to present. This is your work, Elena. You deserve the spotlight." Elena felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Presenting at an international conference was a dream come true, but the thought of standing in front of a room full of experts was daunting. Still, she knew this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. Thank you, Dr. Collins. Over the next few weeks, Elena threw herself into preparing for the conference. She spent hours rehearsing her presentation, refining her slides, and anticipating questions from the audience. Mia helped her practice, offering feedback and encouragement. You're going to kill it, Mia said, after one particularly grueling rehearsal. You know this stuff inside and out. Just remember to breathe and you'll be fine. Elena smiled, grateful for her friend's support. Thanks, Mia. I couldn't do this without you. The day of the conference arrived, and Elena found herself standing in front of a packed auditorium. The room was filled with some of the brightest minds in environmental chemistry, and the weight of the moment was not lost on her. She took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and began her presentation. Her voice was clear and confident as she walked the audience through her research. She explained the methodology, the results, and the potential impact of her work. The room was silent, the audience hanging on her every word. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted into applause. Elena stepped away from the podium, her heart racing. She had done it. She had presented her work to the world, and it had been well received. As she made her way back to her seat, several researchers approached her, offering congratulations and asking questions about her work. Elena answered them, with ease, her confidence growing with each interaction. After the conference, Dr. Collins pulled her aside. Elena, that was incredible, he said, his voice filled with pride. You handled yourself like a seasoned professional. I'm so proud of you. Elena smiled, her chest swelling with pride. Thank you, Dr. Collins. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. As the conference came to a close, Elena felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known before. She had proven herself on an international stage, and the recognition was more than she had ever dreamed of. But she knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much more she wanted to achieve. After the conference, Elena returned to San Diego with a renewed sense of purpose. Her presentation had been a success, and the scientific community was buzzing about her research. She received emails from researchers around the world asking for more details about her methodology and expressing interest in collaborating. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. One afternoon, as Elena was sorting through her inbox, she came across an email that made her heart skip a beat. It was from Dr. Collins, and the subject line read, Opportunity at the University of Toronto. She opened the email and read it carefully. Dr. Collins explained that the University of Toronto had been impressed by her work and was offering her a position as a research assistant in their environmental chemistry department. The position came with a full scholarship for a master's degree and the opportunity to work on cutting-edge projects. Elena sat back in her chair, her mind racing. This was everything she had been working toward. A chance to continue her research at one of the top universities in the world. But it also meant leaving San Diego, leaving Mia, and starting over in a new city. That evening, she met Mia for dinner to discuss the offer. They sat at their usual table, and Elena handed Mia her phone so she could read the email. Mia's eyes widened as she read. Elena, this is incredible. You have to take it. Elena hesitated. I don't know, Mia. It's a huge opportunity, but it's also a big change. I'd have to move to Toronto, and I'd be leaving you behind. Mia reached across the table and squeezed Elena's hand. Elena, this is your dream. You've worked so hard to get here, and you can't let anything hold you back. I'll miss you, but I'll always be here for you. And who knows? Maybe I'll visit you in Toronto. Elena smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thanks, Mia. I don't know what I'd do without you. The next day, Elena met with Dr. Collins to discuss the offer. He was thrilled when she told him she was considering it. Elena, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, he said. The University of Toronto is one of the best in the world, and you'll be working with some of the top researchers in the field. You've earned this. Elena nodded, her resolve strengthening. I think I'm going to accept it. It's just a lot to process. Dr. Collins smiled. It is. But you're ready for this. You've proven that time and time again. A few days later, Elena officially accepted the offer. She spent the next few weeks preparing for the move, packing up her things and saying goodbye to Mia and the friends she had made at the lab. It was bittersweet, but she knew it was the right decision. On her last day in San Diego, Elena stood in front of the lab, her bags packed and her heart full. Dr. Collins and the rest of the team had gathered to say goodbye. "We're going to miss you, Elena," Sarah said, pulling her into a hug. "But we know you're going to do amazing things in Toronto." Elena smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll miss you all too, but I'll be back to visit." Dr. Collins stepped forward, his expression proud. "Elena, you've been an incredible asset to this lab, and I have no doubt you'll continue to shine in Toronto. Remember, this is just the beginning." Elena nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Dr. Collins, for everything." As she walked away from the lab for the last time, Elena felt a mix of emotions: sadness at leaving behind the people who had supported her, but also excitement for the future. She was ready for this new chapter, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The plane touched down in Toronto on a crisp autumn morning. Elena stepped off the plane, her breath visible in the cool air as she took in her new surroundings. The city was bustling with energy, a stark contrast to the laid-back vibe of San Diego. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she made her way to the University of Toronto campus, her new home for the foreseeable future. The university was everything she had imagined and more. The campus was sprawling, with historic buildings mixed with modern facilities. The environmental chemistry department was housed in a state-of-the-art research center, and Elena couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she walked through the doors. Her new supervisor, Dr. Emily Zhang, greeted her warmly. "Elena, welcome to Toronto. We're thrilled to have you here." Elena shook her hand, her nerves easing slightly. "Thank you, Dr. Zhang. I'm excited to be here." Dr. Zhang gave her a tour of the lab, introducing her to the team and explaining the various projects they were working on. Elena listened intently, her excitement growing with each passing moment. The research was cutting edge, and she could see herself making a real impact here. Over the next few weeks, Elena settled into her new routine. Her days were filled with classes, lab work, and meetings with her research team. It was a demanding schedule, but she thrived on the challenge. She was surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the field, and she was determined to make the most of the opportunity. One evening, as she was working late in the lab, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mia. "How's Toronto treating you?" Elena smiled and typed back, "It's amazing. I'm learning so much, and the research is incredible. I miss you, though." Mia's response came quickly. "I miss you too, but I'm so proud of you, Elena. You're living your dream." Elena's heart swelled with gratitude. Mia had been her rock through everything, and she knew she wouldn't be where she was without her friends' support. As the months went by, Elena's work at the university began to gain recognition. Her research on pollutant detection was published in several prestigious journals, and she was invited to speak at conferences around the world. Each success was a reminder of how far she had come, and she felt a deep sense of pride in her accomplishments. One day, as she was preparing for a presentation, Dr. Zhang called her into her office. "Elena, I have some news," she said, her tone serious but excited. "The university has decided to offer you a full scholarship for a PhD program. They want you to continue your research here." Elena's heart leapt. "That's incredible." "Thank you, Dr. Zhang." Dr. Zhang smiled. "You've earned it, Elena. Your work is making a real impact, and we want to support you in any way we can." Elena left the office feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. She had come so far from the girl who had been kicked out of her family home, and now she was being offered the chance to continue her education at one of the top universities in the world. It was a dream come true. That evening, she called Mia to share the news. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "I'm going to be a PhD student," Mia laughed. "I can believe it. You've worked so hard for this, Elena. I'm so proud of you." Elena smiled, her heart full. "Thanks, Mia. I couldn't have done it without you." As she hung up the phone, Eleanor felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in years. She had built a life for herself, one that was filled with purpose and passion. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was more than the failure her parents had tried to make her believe she was.